he's one of the big ones, man. This is yeah. So, but, we
It still tickles me. People are impressed by that.
I remember watching the commentary. What impressed me was how you studied Gunner so closely to
Yeah.
capture the movements and everything. That was really,
I hope I did.
good job, man. Like, even the limp, you incorporated the limp in the end of the original. Fantastic, fantastic. So it's the little stuff. Fans.
Yeah, there's really very little to go on. Somebody who doesn't say anything, doesn't give a lot of clues to who they are. So yeah, I thought, that's one thing, we knew about Leatherface from the original movie, is he fucked himself up.
Yeah, he definitely did.
So yeah. And yeah, I always credit Gunner with, the creation of that character.
Oh yeah.
I got him years and years later, after his life changed completely, but he's fundamentally still that character. And, stories are all about change. And so he did change, but only according to the story, the influences. I'm very glad people recognize some of the, some of the characteristics of the original in what we did. So
yeah, definitely did.
Well, anyway, just boy. Anyway, so you don't need a giant.
No, I don't need a giant interest. The other way. Like your big ass needs to move. Hello, Dan. How are you?
I'm well. How are you?
Very well. Nice to meet you.
And you are?
I am Pop-Tart. I'm the other half, Mr. Shallow here.
Slinky and Pop-Tart. That's just a whole bucket of awesomeness.
It's a whole bucket of something, sir. I don't know what it is.
I'll call it awesomeness.
The only thing I can say, sir, is you are terrifying.
Good.
In the best way possible.
Good. That's kind of the point of it,
Yeah.
Nobody wants a kind, jovial Leatherface.
I don't know. Maybe I could take it once in a while.
Well, he had his vulnerable moments,
Yeah.
But he always responds with a level of menace that I think is a part of the character. He's fundamentally lethal. So
Yeah, he definitely is.
well, unless you're family.
You see him, he's always the family. Did you audition for Texas Chainsaw 3D, or were you referred, or how is it you came about to be this character? How is it you?
What was the journey?
Yeah.
I did not audition. The producer and I met about the time he was negotiating for the rights to Texas Chainsaw Massacre. And we were actually helping a mutual friend create a pilot for this TV show idea he had. And I brought to bear my skills as a carpenter and an electrician and a convincer of people to work for free. and Carl showed up. It was a show about people trying to break into Hollywood as actors in particular. And Carl, of course, being a producer, had a certain insight into that the rest of the people involved didn't have. So he was a critical element to that show. Anyway, we found out we enjoyed a lot of the same things, you know, drinking and smoking cigars and, you know, building shit. He's a carpenter in his own right. Anyway, we became friends. And he was always grateful because he knew that I was an actor, yet I never crossed that line of saying, "Oh, please put me in a movie," you know. And I used to cringe. We'd go out to dinner, go to a bar or something, and you know, somebody'd figure out that he was a movie producer and they're an actor, and then, oh God, it's just painful to watch. He used to tell people that he was a plumber. You know, if he'd meet a woman in a bar or something, you know, that was always, you know, it'd be a while before he mentioned making movies. But anyway, he always appreciated that I never, you know, I wasn't that type, and that's how we could be friends. And so anyway, and he knew I was a writer as well. I did, you know, ask him advice on, you know, developing screenplays, and that kind of thing interests him. So, you know, that was cool. But anyway, as you know, Adam Marcus and Deborah Sullivan cranked out the first draft of the script, and I got to read it, and I gave him some notes, and they were notes about the original movie. And he had seen the original movie, but he did not obsess over it the way I did. So I knew all of the, you know, minute details of it. Although, as I'm aging, those details are fading. I'm going to get to watch it again probably in another year, and it'll be almost like seeing it for the first time. So that's good. Anyway, they were, you know, in the couple of years process of developing the script. And as they were putting the finishing touches on it, when he brought in John Lessenhop to direct, I believe, though I've never asked, you know, I don't really, I don't have to. I think he had the idea of me playing Leatherface before anybody else, certainly before I did. And I think he floated it once before he invited me to this Christmas party at his house. And that was Christmas of 2010. And he also invited Lessenhop and some of the other executive producers and stuff like that. It was just a big holiday. And John, the weekend that the movie was going to come out, he wrote an article for the Huffington Post where he talked about that party. And he claims that he was standing in the kitchen of this house, and the house is kind of open. You know, it's a cool house up in the Hollywood Hills. Beautiful place. He was standing in the kitchen and talking across the countertop to Mark Berg, who you know, produced all the Saw movies.
Okay.
And he apparently kept looking over Mark's shoulder, you know, as he's talking to him, you know, kind of looking past him, and he missed a few things Mark said, I guess, much to Mark's displeasure, because, you know, he's used to better treatment. Anyway, Mark finally says to him, you know, either she's she's going to be really hot, or you're just an asshole. Because he wasn't paying attention to him. And he swears, I was there, but I didn't hear the conversation. I was just standing off on the other side, apparently looking menacing, because that's what, as Pop will attest. But he says, I think I'm looking at Leatherface. And, I think the following week or something, he went and talked to Carl and asked him who I was, what the deal was. And Carl said, oh yeah, Dan's an actor. And, he told him, yeah, he's a good guy and all this stuff. Anyway, we met and discussed it after that. And, I think John was suitably convinced of my grasp of the character, even without reading their final script. I actually read a few drafts, but they had worked on it since then and continued to work on it until we shot it, and even when we were shooting it. But anyway, that was it. As soon as it was announced publicly, that they were in pre-production, they started getting calls from agents for every professional wrestler, stunt guys, football guys, all these people who were big, menacing guys too. But, that just wasn't the direction they wanted. I think they liked me because I didn't look like I spent my life in the gym, I have kind of, well, my arms are normal for my body size. I'm not super bulky. Although my buddy Brett says, you're actually, a defensive tackle. I don't know about that, but he also reps football players, so he thinks in terms of the defensive line in football. But anyway, that was it.
Oh, cool.
I don't believe they ever auditioned anybody else. If they did, they didn't tell me, and I appreciate that. But yeah, it was like I don't think Carl really made the decision. He certainly didn't tell me anything until he came to see me in a play. I was doing this just amateur play down in North Hollywood, and he wanted to see it. And I think that was why, because he'd never seen me act. He was about to say, hey, you want to be a part of my $15 million project. And, he thought, I should probably make sure he can act before. And he loved it. It was a good deal.
Well,
So anyway, that was it.
Honestly, hearing you speak so lovingly, actually, about the character, prior to that story, I think you made a very wise decision in choosing you to play that role. Absolutely.
Well, in the remake,
well, thank you. I don't believe he has any regrets about that. I mean, I've heard, we've been in group conversations, many times where, he's complimented my efforts on the movie. So yeah, I thought it was good.
Absolutely.
I did the best I could.
Did great.
No, I mean, the way I look at it, these iconic characters from horror. There are certain characters from franchises that are very iconic, and it's, I think, very important to choose an actor if they're going to reprise that role.
They stick to the vocabulary of movie.
They care. They put a lot of care into what they do.
You could tell you cared great.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I tried to channel my own ego into being, first of all, true to the character, and then true to the script, because the script is what you need to follow, you know, to have the story make sense.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, the character as he, in his new set of circumstances, you know, was there on the page. So I had a good roadmap. And I just tried not to, you know, that was the part that I could make my own, I guess, is the kind of terms you might put it in.
Yeah.
There's nuances that are, plus the character doesn't speak, so it's all, you know, it's all physical.
Yeah.
Yeah, all like movements and everything.
Yeah. So that's tough in itself.
Yeah, and you know, he does though have a point of view in the movie, and you know, you don't have words to convey what that is. So, you know, he has to think, you know, he has to make decisions, and you have to convey to the audience what that is in movement, you know. So it's in that regard, working in a mask it requires a lot of physical discipline. You can't just be bobbing around all the time, otherwise it's not going to mean anything. You know, it's just going to be confusing, and then you have to just be violent, and, you know, that's not what was in the script. So, you know, he was a real hunting predator for a lot of the movie, you know, and
Oh yeah.
you know, he couldn't just be in a blind rage all the time. You know, when he was, but
You speak about
Yeah,
another
definitely.
actor that does the same for a role that doesn't speak, and Kane Hodder. I mean, that's where he has to emote through that movement.
Yeah.
To convey.
He moves like aggressively.
Yeah, just to convey that. It's very different.
But he mentioned it's a stage point, and I think stage actors are more well versed in the physicality of their movement versus just, you know, and I'm not taking away anybody that's just movies, but stage actors seem to incorporate their whole body in their movements.
Yeah, and actually, you know, movement on stage is far less disciplined because, you know, your acting is to a very wide frame of reference. You know, the whole audience, people sitting on both sides of the stage, you know, are you know, perceiving what you're doing. And so it's in a much wider frame. When you condense it down to the frame of a movie picture, you know, it becomes a different, you know, a different dynamic. And, you know, especially in close-ups, you know, you don't have a lot of moves you can squander that you can cover, you know, that you know, don't have dialogue to explain them. You know, the scene toward the end at the kitchen when he sits down in the chair and his cousin, you know, wants to show him some kindness, and so she starts to clean him up, and then she, you know, she can't resist but touch the mask, and you know, nobody touches the mask. The last guy who touched the mask got cut in half with a fucking chainsaw. So, you know, nobody touches the mask. Grandma never touched the mask. And you know, he had to draw that line. He let her wipe it with a rag, and that was as much intimacy as he could handle. And the movement in that shot occurs in about that much space.
Yeah.
You know, you get his trepidation about it because, you know, he moves his head back, you know, that much, and that's it, you know. So all that stuff has to be kind of planned out.
Yeah. Yeah, I was gonna ask you about that the scene where you cut Kenny in half. Like how did you prepare for that? Like the special effects were like really cool and like how he looked so alive. It just like how did that
Yeah.
all
Well, he was alive. He was
for
dead.
a minute. Yeah.
Yeah, no, and the hard part of that scene was when he was unconscious, laying there on the table. Being able to pick him up because they wanted to do that in one shot. They didn't want to cut between those two shots, and so you see it. Leatherface picks him up, turns around, and then takes a step and hefts him up onto the meat hook. And he's just, he's fairly short and unconscious, and he was damn heavy.
You did that in one
And
shot?
yeah, I don't think I couldn't do it today. No,
How many takes was that? How many takes did you have to do?
of that shot,
Yes.
I think that was a oneer. Yeah,
Wow.
I think we did that once.
Bravo. That's awesome.
I think we did inserts in case they were afraid it didn't work, where I just had him on the meat hook and slammed him down. But I think they ended up using the continuous shot.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah. It's all one take.
Yeah.
One shot. Yeah.
And and then cutting him in half. We started cutting with the live carom, hanging on the meat hook, and he felt it. I got close with the chainsaw, but didn't touch him. And then they insert the dummy that's full of blood-filled condoms and what the special effects guys refer to as nurnies. Nurnies.
Wow.
And nurnies are just these like scraps of silicone that they make by just kind of randomly spreading it on some surface and then peeling it off and then tearing it up and then just add more blood. And there was a guy there with a garden sprayer full of blood, pumping blood through the body.
That's awesome.
And then when the legs hit the floor, that's just juicy. Really.
Seems fantastic.
Now, trust Chris to ask about that.
Oh, yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, it was really, really cool seeing like how he looks so alive still and screaming when you're like sawing through him. It's a great scene.
That's just the movie magic, man.
Yeah, wonderful. Oh no, I mean,
Chris has a bunch of questions, man. We're I'm just stoked we're talking to Leatherface. Like I'm still in shock. Great.
All right, cool. Like the van scene where you push the whole van over. Did you have help? Did you have like help with that, or was that just you?
No, I rolled that van all over by myself, man. That was
I knew it.
I love him.
No, there was. I believe there was a couple of guys off camera with. I think they had a rope on it, and so some folks were, because you can't do that. They kind of tried to give the impression it was on a slope, so that it would at least have some element of possibility. But nobody's sitting there thinking, oh, I wonder how he's rolling that van over. It's a nice high energy moment there. Nobody's worried that, oh, he can't do that. Maybe later they'll think, oh, wow, I wonder how he rolled that van over. But he's Leatherface.
Yeah, Leatherface with like superhuman powers. So
he's a strong guy.
Yeah.
He was that motivated.
And to protect grandma.
With like all the movements, how did you like learn to get that down? Like, did you do anything to learn that, or?
I went to Louisiana a week before we started shooting, to work on all the stunts and you know, all that stuff. And then a good part of that was spent just on a sound stage with a few different people, you know, to kind of say, all right, this, I'm going to try this and see what this looks like. And, you know, I tried several different walks out, and then we got it down to a couple. And then I got together with the director and I said, all right, what looks like, you know, believable? And he chose what you see in the movie, obviously. Basically, you know, the walk is, all right, you got an old injury in the right thigh, and Leatherface kind of walks on his heels with his hips kind of forward. You know, it's kind of a hip lead. And that's it. And then you've got the weight of the chainsaw that kind of, you know, influences, you know, when he's got the chainsaw, you know, how he moves. There's not a lot you can do about that because the thing's heavy.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I wanted to ask about the chains. Now, were there different saws for different scenes? Like, was there like the hero saw, and the background saw? Or
well, we had two of each type of saw, actual real saws. One had the real chainsaw blade on it, and the other one had what the prop guys referred to as the Bama blade. Apparently, there is some kind of a rivalry between Louisiana and Alabama, and so and I know a lot of people from Alabama, and they're very nice people. And but anyway, they refer to it as the Bama blade because it's toothless.
Oh, terrible.
And so, you know, they had carefully filed all the teeth off the blade for the safety of the other actors, you know.
Oh yeah, of
But
course.
they did have, you know, every time you see a chainsaw in that, it's a real chainsaw and it's got a chain on it. If it comes close to another actor in the shot, it's, you know, it's the Bama blade.
Yeah,
Which
I was wondering.
I shouldn't call it that because I like people from
no,
Alabama.
that's fair.
Did you, when you were on set as Leatherface, did you make any of your fellow actors uncomfortable?
I was in a safe state in character.
No, I don't think I did stay, but I make people uncomfortable just in the grocery store. So, you know, yeah, I would assume they were kind of uncomfortable, and they were, you know, most of them were, you know, a lot younger than I was, and they all lived in a hotel in Shreveport during production, and I lived in a house on the outskirts of town with some of the rest of the crew and the producer. We had a nice house on the outskirts of town, so you know I didn't hang out with them. Not that I didn't like them. I mean, they were all really nice people. But yeah, there's just something about it, you know. I mean, I'm 6'6". At that time, I was about 275, and you know the boots had heels in them. You know, they added another inch and a half, and you know I was covered in blood most of the time, so you know nobody was coming up giving me hugs. Actually, no, that's not true. When we were shooting the carnival scene, we had I think we had 150 extras, and one of them was this little girl who was just thrilled to be there, and it was you know it's Halloween time in the movie, and so everybody was dressed up in costume, and I forget what her costume was, but it was basically this frilly white dress, and she her mother came over and said she really wants a hug. And I got the apron on, it's covered in blood and everything. And I said, sweetheart, it'll ruin your dress if I hug you. And she immediately starts taking off her dress. And hey, wait a minute, lady. Anyway, she stripped down to her t-shirt and she wanted a hug. And so I gave her a nice hug, and I put handprints on her back, and the apron has like a pocket on it. And so that imprinted on her shirt. And she walked around the rest of the night in that t-shirt, and everybody was amazed. And pretty soon everybody wanted a hug. And so we were basically imprinting the apron and bloody hands on everybody. The makeup crew was pretty much following me around and bloodying me back up for hugs. I did. There was this one girl who was wearing a nice dress, a white dress again, but she was an adult and she wanted one. All right, if you're an adult, you can make that choice. So we printed her a really nice bloody dress, which I hope she still enjoys.
So, Leatherface.
I know. I mean, do you guys? Because I want to start going. I want to interrupt you guys.
Oh, yeah, well.
I really want to know, sir. When did you catch the acting bug? What production did you do that you said that's what I wanted?
I think I was probably 3, and my mother asked me what I wanted for my birthday, and I said a Superman costume. And so, it just went on from there. The first, I never really pursued it until I was out of high school. I went to a vocational high school where I learned architectural drafting and design, and they didn't have, a drama club or anything like that. It was all business. And so I had all this pent up desire to show off. And so I started with the community drama workshop in Las Vegas. And I was in the first movie I think I was in was with Christopher Lee in 1984, a movie that I never heard Christopher Lee mention, so I won't. So bad. What he was doing there, I don't know, but if you really want to figure out which one it is, Christopher Lee, Richard Roundtree, Mariska Hargitay was in it. That was one of her first roles. Anyway, that actually, it was at that time that I had met the actor who achieved his greatest fame playing Count Yorga the Vampire. His name was Robert Quarry. And he was just a friend of this guy I worked for, and who actually most of my family worked for this guy. He had his own company, and he was a longtime friend of my aunt and uncle. And so anyway, I met Robert Quarry through him, and Robert thought it was pretty cool that I wanted to be an actor. And his advice to me was, just move to Hollywood. You'll make a living playing monsters, because I was so big. And I could never bring myself to take the vow of poverty required to be an actor. And so, it was 25 years later that I finally realized I'm not doing what makes me happy. And threw away a job that I was making a good living with, mistakenly thinking I had enough money to live in LA for a couple of years without working. Boy, was I wrong. So I inadvertently took that vow of poverty, and you know, it seems that, you know, the gods of cinema require that. You know, that's just the way it is. There's no easy way to do it. You know. But anyway, it was, you know, it wasn't until I was doing press for Texas Chainsaw, and I think I told this story, and I realized, holy shit, he was right. You know, because I was actually, because I never really paid attention to the monster part of it. You know, I'd heard it, and okay, you know, that sounds fun, but, you know, I'm an actor. But yeah, the monster part was kind of cool.
The way you spoke about Leatherface, like I said, so loving. Obviously you are a fan of horror. Is that correct?
I am a fan. I have met people who are big fans. I had no idea, you know, how acute the disease could be. These people are fans. I enjoy horror movies and always have since childhood. But yeah, no, I when back in 1981, my friends and I went to the drive-in to see Texas Chainsaw Massacre because, you know, obviously somebody made a horrible mistake and they were going to show this forbidden movie at the drive-in, and so we of course had to go see it, and it was awesome. And when my family finally got a VCR, I went out and bought two movies, Eraserhead and Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
Oh, that's epic.
And, you know, I wore those tapes out. Just, yeah, there's, you know, when you recall the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre, it's like remembering your own nightmare.
Yeah.
You know, the things that stick in your head are, you know, more visual than, you know, anything, and sounds. Yeah, it's like remembering a horrible dream you had.
That movie's terrible.
But
Yeah.
anyway, you know, when Texas Chainsaw 3D came out, I went back to Las Vegas where I went to high school, and was driving by that drive-in where we went to see the original movie, and Texas Chainsaw was playing there. So that was cool. But I didn't get to see it. Actually, next Saturday I'm going to be in the Scranton area, and they're going to screen Texas Chainsaw at the Circle Drive-In Saturday night. So I'm finally going to get to see it on a drive-in theater screen. So
It's amazing to see.
that'll be fun.
Yeah.
Now, since you saw the original at the drive-in in 81,
Yeah.
I think
I don't think I've ever seen the original in a regular theater.
Oh,
I think I've only ever seen it on uh, on the drive-in screen, and, you know, on television. I'm trying to remember if I ever saw it at a real movie theater. I don't think so.
if you could go back in time now, you could go back in time and tell yourself in 1981 while you're watching that film that you would be playing Leatherface in a film one day, what would you have thought?
Yeah, no, you can't have thoughts like that. That was, yeah.
That would be too
No,
much.
if somebody had even suggested it, you know, I would have made fun of them.
Yeah. How does it feel to have like played one of the most iconic killers in movie history?
Yeah.
Um, it's kind of a hard thing to, I mean, at least for me to wrap my head around that. Um, you don't approach any role as being iconic. That's not what it's about. Um, the role is iconic, you know, outside of itself. Um, the process of actually doing the work was very incremental, and you know there were a few physical challenges in the moment by moment, you know enacting of it. But for the most part, yeah, just becoming Leatherface is it's a step-by-step process, and there were a lot of people helping me. So yeah, iconic never enters into it, and I still don't. I don't know. I look at you know Texas Chainsaw movies, and you know get excited like anybody, I guess. Yeah, I don't really go around perceiving myself as, oh, that guy who played that iconic role. It always tickles me when somebody, you know, finds out that, oh yeah, that was me, and they're impressed. Um, that's really a cool thing. Um, yeah, yeah, you can't play iconic.
That's awesome, man.
Awesome.
What was your most memorable part of making the film?
Most memorable. Um, I, you know, there were there were two moments that stood out as part of the process, um, and one of them only really became impactful, if that's a word, later. Um, it was meeting Marilyn Burns, and of course meeting Gunnar Hansen. Because I was never a big, oh, Gunnar Hansen, Leatherface fanatic guy. I didn't know really anything about Gunnar as a person. I looked at everything I could find, interviews where he spoke about the movie, and the character, and everything that was written that I could find. But I never really, really delved into who he was as an actor or just a human being. And it was pretty exciting though when I finally realized he was going to be there, and I was going to get to meet him. And so I began, in the process, I developed a real admiration and appreciation for what he did. And so getting to finally meet him, and confess how unabashedly I was going to rip him off, and paranoid
You
of
did a good
his
job.
work. um, you know that was cool. And we eventually became um, friends. I don't know, there were very few people who knew Gunnar really well, and I didn't. I don't. But we certainly spent some time together, and he was so, he was always looking out for me, as you know, somebody who's going through something he went through. Um, he was very generous that way after the fact with me. And, Marilyn Burns, the best part of our work together, actually, all of our work together on the movie did not make it into the movie. Because at the end of the movie, after Heather reads the letter, Leatherface was supposed to put Grandma back in her coffin in the ground. And so we shot that. We shot, I carried her from the front door all the way out to that cemetery in the side yard and set her down in the coffin. And another one of the things from the original movie that kind of informed how I approached that was when when the hitchhiker and Leatherface bring Grandpa down to dinner. They set him up at the table, and Leatherface pats him on the head and gives him a little kiss. Leatherface was a very, tender fellow. And so I knew he would certainly be feeling it deeply to finally let go of Grandma, who, obviously took good care of him. And so, he puts her in the coffin and gives her a kiss on the head before he lays her down and closes that lid, and then proceeds to bury her. And it was such an emotionally draining experience to do that. I mean, you cannot imagine what that's like. And it was doubly horrible because of Marilyn. When I met her on set, I was standing in that dining room with some of the other actors, and she came up and introduced herself, and she took my hand and patted it, and she spoke so softly. And she said it was just so nice to meet me, and she just gushed all over, and she was Grandma.
Yeah.
And I mean, and that, I had that to hold on to when I was doing this scene, and they shot the whole thing. And I mean, Leatherface, I will tell you, was sobbing under the mask, and it was so horrendous. And I don't know if there was a dry eye on set watching this horrible creature bury his grandmother. It was just brutal. And it was the exact wrong thing for the movie at that moment. You don't want people walking out of your Texas Chainsaw movie crying. And that's what it would have been. People would have, oh my God, that was just the saddest thing. You don't want people to think that about your Texas Chainsaw movie. And so they couldn't use any of it. And I hadn't really realized, what had happened until probably a year later. The movie was delayed in release because of things Lionsgate was doing. But Marilyn called me on the phone to ask me if I was going to partake in some event that they were doing. And I thought for a minute when we were talking that somebody was, going to prank me with this, that this wasn't really Marilyn Burns, because, she was really just flirty and sexy on the phone. Her voice was, kind of what I remembered from the movie, the original movie. It sounded like her. It didn't sound like the woman I met in the mansion at all. This meek, little, soft-spoken grandma. And then, it kind of dawned on me what she had done. And that's the greatest thing an actor can do for another actor, I mean, to give them the opportunity to do a scene like that. It was incredible. But anyway, those are the two things I remember most vividly. And trying to bash Kenny's fake head with with a fake hammer was brutal. You know, I don't know why they didn't just give me a real hammer. I guess they didn't think that the fake head could stand up to a real hammer. And so you see the blows. I mean, they are brutally hard because the hammer weighed nothing. And, you know, I just had to throw everything I had into it to make it crush, you know.
Yeah, I think of things like lots of movies. Yeah. Oh, you know, man.
Well, actually, one other thing. When you watch films yourself, what is it that you pay like very close attention to? I mean, for instance, I'm a very big fan of the props department and makeup and special effects departments, so I pay a lot of attention to their work in film. Is there anything in particular that you like to watch?
I always, you know, I enjoy, you know, elements of cinematography and you know, cinematic composition, but I always watch actors because it's really a very technical thing how you act in front of a camera, especially in close-up. And old movies are just so much better acted cinematically than new movies. You know, there have been all sorts of, I don't know, sloppy adaptations enabled by technology. You know, the whole shaky camera thing I find just completely distracting now. It's such a gimmick. You know, the handheld camera look. It's I don't know. I don't go for it. I've used it, but you use it sparingly as it serves the story. I can't watch a lot of TV anymore because of that, you know. Just the constant shaky camera. But, you know, when you're in close up, you really have to have the discipline to be still while you're speaking. You know, you can't let everything that crosses your mind influence how your head moves. You know, you have to remain kind of artificially still. Otherwise, you know, the real powerful things you have to work with get lost. And you know, I think actors before 1960 had a much better, or directors probably had a much better grasp of the importance of that. But yeah, I watch acting, and I hate to see. Actually, I don't hate to see it. I love to see when an actor, you know, has a move in a scene and he repeats it in 2 shots. Having just, I shot a movie with a friend of mine, Brett Wagner, and he is such a craftsman. I love working with the guy. He had a line in this movie. I wrote and directed it. He had a line in the movie, basically says, fishing, I guess I could go fishing. And he had this hand move where he says, fishing, I guess I could go fishing. And he did it exactly in the wide shot, and he adjusted it in the close-up, and it matched perfectly. It was amazing. But, you know, that's the dumb shit I look at.
I think my very last question is, regardless of what genre it is, what is your favorite film? The one that makes you smile the most?
Yeah. Probably W.C. Fields' It's a Gift.
I very much appreciate that.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I love that movie. I mean, that's Marie Dressler and Wallace Beery and Min and Bill. That's another great movie. And you know, almost anything by Buster Keaton.
I understand.
The Marx Brothers.
Yeah.
I mean, for smiling movies.
I take a lot of heat.
Oh, there are so many. You know, I think one of the greatest movies ever shot was Paper Moon by Peter Bogdanovich. I mean, that is just a stunning piece of cinema. I'm gonna shoot a movie on film just to try and, you know, see, you know, what he went through and what it took to achieve that. There's a shot in that movie where Ryan O'Neal and Tatum O'Neal are driving in the car, and they have this whole conversation and fight in the car, an open car without a roof on it, driving at speed down a road, you know, in Kansas. And Tatum O'Neal is going back and forth with Ryan O'Neal about how, you know, take her to the next depot and she'll get out of the car, and, you know, the whole thing. And they have this big blow up, and she reaches in the back seat and pulls out her box to get her map, and she's looking at the map. You can take me here. And they're going back and forth and fighting and everything. And then Ryan O'Neal says, "Ooh, those are some good towns. Maybe we could do a little business there." And you know, they have this big fight, and they're out of Bibles, and finally the fight de-escalates, and Ryan O'Neal says, "Are you hungry?" She says, "Yeah." And so they're going to go get something to eat. The amazing thing about that, besides the fact that Tatum O'Neal was 8 years old when they shot it, it's a single shot, and there is not a cut in it. And I think it's like 8 minutes long. An 8-year-old kid in an open car with business and a mountain of dialogue. And, you know, they pulled this off, and it's, you know, shot through the windshield of the car. It was amazing. Anyway, I don't know if now you got me rambling.
No, I was going to say I take a lot of heat for mine because I obviously these guys are fantastic.
Well, no,
horror fans,
good, man.
but I appreciate comedy to a very high degree. And my favorite film is the original Odd Couple, '68.
Oh yeah.
You can't replace that.
Yeah.
Not at all. No. There's so many good things in film.
Yeah, Jack Lemmon was brilliant.
Yes, absolutely. I don't think he gets enough. I mean, he gets a lot of credit, but I don't think he gets enough.
I think Walter.
That's you know, but that's awesome.
Yes.
Yeah, some like it hot. Oh my God. What a great movie.
I'm trying to think of another one. The Great Race.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I was gonna ask, when you were shooting the scene where Heather slides Leatherface the chainsaw and says, "Do your thing, cuz." How was it like shooting that scene? Because it looked like you went through a lot.
Yeah, that was a long day. And apparently, totalitarian regimes advocate the use of rubber hoses on prisoners to make them talk. And the prop department decided that it would be cruel to use an actual, you know, metal pipe. So they made a rubber hose but it wasn't stiff enough, so they stuck a steel rod in it, and that was the prop pipe. And there were several factors that led to the resulting brutality of shooting that scene. One was the wardrobe, the costume designer. Actually, the producer asked me, he says, what did you do to piss her off? I said, I didn't do it. He says, well, the scene where you get, beaten with a pipe, she puts you in this, wispy silk shirt that we can't hide any pads under, that's, that's pretty telling. I said, I don't know. I said, maybe I did something. So they couldn't use any pads under it, and Paul Ray did something. I don't know if it was on set, but he wrenched his back, and he was in pain that day. He was taking every painkiller he could find, and it's one thing to beat somebody with a pipe, but eventually, and you can make it look good, but you've got to pull your hits. You can't just wail into somebody. And he was in such pain, and he was so exhausted by, every shot, it seemed like we did, 10 takes. And I don't know what they got out of that, but it took a long time. And anyway, yeah, by the end of it, man, I was just black and blue. And it wasn't especially painful, but man, it took a toll on the body. There were no permanent injuries, but no bones were broken. But yeah, that was brutal. And in the script, when he's yelling at Leatherface, telling him how, he couldn't believe that, the freak is the one who survived, and, just berating him. It says, Leatherface mumbles unintelligibly. Well, as an actor, you can't mumble unintelligibly. You have to have something intelligible to mumble. And you can do it unintelligibly, but you have to know, you can make it not understandable, but you have to have something. And so I struggled as to what Leatherface would be screaming when they're beating him like this, and dragging him into this carcass grinder. And he's actually, this will be a good Jeopardy trivia question. He's quoting the Bible. He's quoting Christ on the cross, saying Eli Eli lama sabachthani, and that's what he's screaming as they're dragging him to the meat grinder. And I kept that going, even because we recorded ADR after we shot the movie, to fill in some of the sounds that Leatherface made, and that's actually what he's screaming in the soundtrack. You can't tell because it's unintelligible. But anyway, I thought it gave some dimension to the character.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
Yeah. I have one question. Not during the fittings, but when you first put that mask and walked out to do a scene, that kind of, holy shit.
The very first thing I shot on the movie was the scene that they play just a snippet of after the credits. I don't know if you ever stayed through the credits, where Heather's parents come to the mansion to try and make up with their daughter. And Leatherface comes to the door, bursts through the door with the chainsaw revving. That was the very first scene. And nobody had, none of the other actors had actually seen me in full regalia at that point. And the few crew members who were inside the house when I was there at the door, they stood back.
Yeah.
It's an impressive sight, and you do not want to have anything to do with that character.
Oh.
And then, when we shot the scene, we went through the entire thing, and they said, all right, you're going to step out the door and rev the saw, and they're going to, freak out and start running, and you're going to chase them. And like I say, this is the very first shot we shot on the movie, and we learned a valuable lesson because Sue Rock and David Bourne took off running down this walkway. Sue was so terrified, she fell down, lost her shoe, and got back up and continued running. I had to take a double step to give her a chance to survive because I was going to kill her. And so I chased them, and there's actually a road out in front of this house, which you never see in the movie. And we got all the way to that road, and I figured, oh, well, fuck, we've got to be out of frame. And, but nobody yelled cut. And so they stopped and I stopped, and we said, I guess that was good. And we turn around, and, you can see the entire crew. I turn off the saw, and we see the entire crew rolling on the ground laughing because apparently they had yelled cut right about just after Sue fell down. But when you got the chainsaw going, nobody hears you yell cut. And so that was one thing we always had to have somebody, kind of in my visual frame of reference, to raise a hand for cut if the saw was gone, because when you got your chainsaw revved up, you don't stop. I mean, it's
Great.
just
not natural.
I know we have to wrap it up. I know we do. But I don't have a final question. But I have a very final long-winded compliment. I myself, I love all film. I'm beginning to appreciate horror more.
She still won't let me watch Texas Chainsaw.
It creeps me out to no end. But I will say, sir, hearing you speak about not only your experiences on set, but how you feel about the character, how you portrayed him, and how you feel about the film as a whole, it gives me a far better and far more of appreciation for it, I will say. So
Well,
thank you.
That's nice of you to say.
Trust me, meant every word.
She's a hard sell, too.
I did have one final question. When Leatherface is putting on the mask and it looks like he's sewing into his cheek, was that actually done? Like actually sewed into his cheek, or was that like movie magic?
Yeah, they don't let you sew the mask on.
Yeah.
But
I think so. It just really looked like very real.
yeah. When we originally shot that in Louisiana, I mimed the entire thing without a needle and thread in my hand. I just mimed it. They said, all right, you're going to sew the mask on. So, and I kind of planned out how it would work and, how, what it would feel like and acted it up, I mean, I did the best I could with it. And they screened a rough cut for the executives over at Lionsgate. And one of the comments after the movie was over one of the producers said, "Oh my God, that scene where he sews the mask on his face, that is just so awesome." And the producer said, "Yeah, it's going to be great when we finally get the digital needle and thread, put in. It's going to be really cool." And she said, "What do you mean? He sewed that mask on his face." No, there's no needle and thread. It's not there yet. And she says, no. And she swore she saw a needle and thread, which is how good my miming was.
Oh wow.
And so anyway, it was probably a month later, the producer got the proposal from the 3D guys on putting that needle and thread in, and it was either $70,000 or $80,000.
Yeah.
And this is to shoot a 3D feature film. This was a low budget movie, and they just didn't have the money. And we had some reshoots to do in Culver City, out in California. And so the producer was racking his brain how to do this, and he came up with this scheme. And he calls me up, and he says, "Would you mind sticking a real needle inside your mouth?" And I said, "No." I said, "I'll sew the fucking mask on if it gets the movie done. We'll just do it." He says, "No, you don't have to poke yourself with it. You just have to be able to put the thing in your mouth, an actual needle." I said, "Yeah, I can do that." So anyway, he was the one who devised the whole thing. And the trick was, there were a couple of needles and a couple of threads, and one judicious cut. I had a needle and thread in my left hand, and it was a clean but rough thread. It stuck out visually.
Yeah.
And then there was a staged needle and thread inside the mask, where just the very tip, just the enough to get a hold of it, was there, and that was a bloodied string. And so basically, I let the camera see the needle going in with the string hanging down, and then I hid it as I brought it out, as I was starting to pull it here. And then there's the cut. And then they replaced the thread, that should be there, with one that there was somebody behind me, behind the mask, and I had it going into my mouth, and I was basically holding it with my tongue, so it was hanging out of my mouth, and we just timed it. And, I added enough, lip twitches to sell it that it was hurting, and so as I pulled the needle away, somebody behind me was pulling that string up, and it works. If you look at it frame by frame, you can see they're not perfectly synchronized, but it's close enough that your brain buys it.
Yeah, it turned out really good.
Yeah, never seen that before.
No,
and stitch the mask directly to his face.
And personally,
Gunner was pleased with that little moment. He said, "Oh, I wish I'd have thought of that."
That's awesome.
It adds that level of tangible dedication that Leatherface has to wearing the mask. He doesn't want to let that go.
That's his face. That's his face. Yeah.
like I said,
It's
I'm
his
much
identity.
digital. That digital effects, I hate them.
Practical.
Hate 'em.
All the way.
You see very few of them in 3D, in Texas Chainsaw 3D, that is.
So great.
You're just awestruck.
I'm just awestruck. It's fantastic.
I will tell you, Dan, before he placed the Skype call, he was walking through the door, and he's like, "I'm so nervous."
Yeah.
And I'm like, "Are you okay?" And he goes, "I'm gonna talk to Leatherface."
Yeah. I don't get starstruck.
Huh. Well, I hope it was enjoyable for you.
It was
Absolutely.
amazing. Wow, this is great. You know, it couldn't have been better. You are a true actor. You know?
Oh,
You brought this character to life in such a way that
I don't think anyone else could.
No, I mean Gunnar. You know, obviously Gunnar Hansen, but you added so much more to the character on so many levels. And
yeah. Well, like I say, a lot of that was on the page, you know.
still has
you
to
know,
bring it to life.
So I can't take all the credit for the character. I mean, there was definitely I loved the script when I read it, you know. I still remember the first time I read it. I said, you know, I told him why the fuck do I feel bad for Leatherface at the end of it, you know? But you do.
It's a fun movie. It's real fun.
Yeah.
Oh, it definitely is.
Yeah. Yeah. This was fantastic.
I just want to know when you're coming to Florida.
Yes. Take you out and get you a beer, man. Seriously.
Yeah, no, I've got a lot of friends in Florida now. I really do need to get down there. I'm up in New York where it's cold, which I love the winter, but you know, a little Florida break might be good. Do you have any connections for some Cuban cigars down there?
I might, sir.
Might.
Yes.
All right.
Oh God.
Yes. I was going to ask you what your favorite was, but I think you just answered it for me.
Yeah. Let me make a
Yeah, I had a nice Partagas the other day, Cuban. That was good.
Oh, my friend Rob, I
The
blasted.
Cubans just know how to make cigars, you know. I mean, and they have the best tobacco. So
Yeah, I was just, we were just at the club, and they had a gentleman out there handling cigars.
That's 3 of them. So yeah. No, absolutely.
All right.
So Tampa, anytime that you want to come by.
Come down to the shop. We'll hang out.
All right.
But thank you so much.
You are
Yeah.
wonderful.
My pleasure.
Thank you for coming on the show.
You know.
It was nice talking to you guys.